Okay, can you guys just mute your microphones, please? And who's this? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so now we've created our project. Now, let me just add a simple button so that we can be able to write some code. So we'll actually start with the arrays. So let's do that. For simplicity, we're not going to rename the button. Now, for sure, by now you guys know about these options. Option strict, as well as option explicit. If I remember very well, yes, we turn this option when we want to ensure that, we always convert our types ourselves. And then for this one is when we want to so this forces the programmer to turn or to declare the global variables. But you guys know the difference between the global variables and the local variables. If I declare a variable here at the top, or right just after this form one, it's called a global variable. Yeah, a global variable. But if I declare a variable inside of this subprogram here, or this button, or another subroutine, then it's no longer a global variable, but it's called a local variable, meaning it's local only to this variable, also to this button or to this subprogram. There is no any other button or subroutine that can access this variable here that I'm declaring. So let's say dim some variable and then as integer. Yeah, so this here is called a local variable. The ones that we declare at the top here are called what? Global variables, meaning any other button down there or subroutine can access and use them. I hope this makes sense. Let me just ensure something here. Yeah, so can you guys still hear me? Just a simple, you can just type there in the chat to ensure that you can still hear me.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for confirming how to set up the UJ grid and how to use a 2D array. Okay, let me note this as well. Okay, so now, what is that thing? So yeah, let's just declare a simple variable like, let's say you can let's call it name, and this can just be a string, obviously. And we can just come here. Oh, is that sorry about that? Someone is joining Simpiwe. Okay, so why is it taking time? Anyway, yeah, so we can declare this global variable here and then try to use it here. So let's say message box something like, let's actually initialize this. So we can say name and then input box. You guys already know about the input boxes by now, I know. And then message box name What is it saying? What is it saying? Variable and config property made in there. Yeah. So what's going on? What is it? Okay, so I can enter my name here. Hey, wait, what's going on? Oh, it didn't do you display? Name doesn't display. Sure. We did, but we have a duplicate here. So this is how you can actually declare your global variable and use it. In other words. So what did we just do here? Well, we declared a global variable and then used it inside of another button. Notice that we can also, like, we can reuse this global variable across multiple buttons or across multiple subroutines. For example, if we declare a subroutine here and say, and call it some, let's just call it, let's call it something like that. Notice that we can still use this global variable here. Let me show you message box and then my name. As you can see, it does not give us any error, but the moment we declare a local variable in here, so we use dim, the keyword dim, when we want to declare local variables. So if you guys haven't done this yet, you will come across these very soon. So let's call it some variable as string, and then the moment we try to use this variable in here, it should give us some issues. The reason for that is because local variables are only accessible to where they were declared. So in this case, we've declared it. Okay, let's demonstrate this. Some variable. As you can see, it says this is not declared, or it may not be. So as you can see, the reason for this is because it's only local to this button. Now let's go through the arrays. Mhm. Uh, So let's start with simple arrays. Let's declare like a static array. So we have two types of arrays. We have a static array and a dynamic array. A static array is the one whereby we declare, like, we give it a size while declaring it. For example, private my array, and then I can give it a size and say 5. I've given it a size as integer. So what I've done here is to basically declare an array that will store integers. And I've also given it a size before we can even go further. So we don't now need to say redeem. Oh, you guys, okay, let's not go, let us not get ahead of ourselves. Now, what can we do with this array? Well, we can store the elements in the array. There's just a lot of things we can do to this array. If you want to test your array, there are many ways of doing that. So you can use this syntax for manually populating your array. Oh, wait, who's this? Admit. Yeah, for those who just joined, can you guys just drop your, go to the chat and then just type the things that you want us to go through or the questions that you have. We're also going to have a session for questions as well. Okay. So as I was saying, there are many ways of storing like the data into the array. This is one of the ways. But obviously this is for testing purposes. There is no real program that will just like store elements in this way. This is for small programs, obviously. So someone asked about indexes, and they was like, what's an index and what does it do? Okay, an index is a number that basically references the data. For an example, this 3 is at position number 1. So if we can think of an index as a position of an element in an array, 3 is at position number 1. This is at position number 2, position number 3, position number 4, and position number 5. So that's how the indexes or the indices work. Now, in many programming languages like Java, C++, I think even Visual Basic, indices start at position 0. In other words, if we say, so in other words, 3, let's actually do this to demonstrate this message box, and then my array at index 0. Yeah, so it's 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. In many programming languages like Java, C++, yeah, so the indices start as 0 instead of 1. And I will demonstrate these guys to you in a second. Look at this. So index 0 gives us 3. And then what about index number 1? It should give us a 4. But obviously we can, okay, this thing is invisible. Okay. So yeah, when you store your elements in an array using this syntax, you cannot control the first index. So by default or automatically, Visual Basic is going to make your first index to be 0. But we wanna ensure that we actually start at 1. And to do that, we can just let's do this actually. Oh yeah, so another syntax or another way of storing your data inside of your array is the following. So you specify an index. You can say index number 1, store something. Index number 2, store something. Position number 3, store something. So in other words, an index is a position, if that makes sense. A position in an array. It's called an index. So when we want to refer to an element or to a number or anything in an array, we refer to that using an index. So as I've demonstrated. So yeah, this is another way of storing our data inside of an array. We are saying go to position number 1 and put an 8. Go to index number 2 and put 11. Go to position number 3 and put 22. Yeah, so this is another way of doing that. But wait a minute. Notice that we keep on specifying. So these things are kind of sequential. Like this index is here. It's 1, 2, 3. So we can actually take an advantage of that by using a loop. Because remember, a loop is a control structure that runs in a sequential way. So why don't we just say for I is equal to 1 to something. And then we can just say my array, then we specify the index. Now, because I runs from 1 to 5, that's what we want, because it can actually help us to access the indices of this array. So we can specify our I here, because I will change or every time when this loop increments. So we can just take our I and multiply it by 2 and then add some number to that. What are we doing here? Okay, so we're taking the variable I, which basically represents numbers from 1 to 5. So we're taking 1, for example, multiplied by 2, and then add 10, and then take this entire result, and then store those inside or at a position I or at index I. That's what we're trying to do here, because I'm trying to demonstrate something. Okay, now we can just, okay, from there we can just set up the grid. Okay, oh yeah, so where were we? Now I wanna see, let us try to display the what's this? The elements of our array that we've actually stored here. Before continuing, remember that I said that our things, or not our things, the indices in programming languages, including VB, started 0. But notice that here we have actually started at 1. Will this work? Wouldn't we run into like issues? What do you think? Anyway, that's what I'm trying to demonstrate here. Let's actually display the elements that are stored inside of this array, or the results of these. Okay, you don't need to make another loop. So we'll use an index to specify the kind of position that we want to like display from this array. Let's say we want to display position number 2. So obviously at position number 2 we have the following. So it's gonna say 2 times 2, which is 4, then plus 10, which is around 14. So we expect to have a 14 here. And so the point that I'm trying to make is that although Visual Basic expects us to start at 0, like our first index to be 0 when using arrays, here at UJ, they actually prefer starting at 1, or like to avoid this thing of confusing ourselves when counting. Because think about it, if our array has a length of 5, for example, and then you'll realize that this index number 5, don't actually work in essence. It will give you like array out of bounds. So they're trying to avoid situations whereby we're trying to access like the last number, but it keeps on giving us an array out of bounds. Like there is a lot of confusion when it comes to like using 0-based indexing. So that is what they're trying to avoid. So hence they're forcing Visual Basic to start at 1 instead of 0. Actually, will this work? Let's see. Index number 5, it should work. Okay, so this is called a static array. What is a static array again? Well, it's an array whereby we give it a size on the same line of declaration. So when you declare an array, we give it a size. So it's called a static array. And also this is called a 1D array because it only has like one dimension. It can only store elements in the same dimension or in the same direction, if you want to think of it that way. Now we have a dynamic array. A dynamic array is the opposite of a static array. So what happens is that you wanna give it a size at runtime. What is runtime? So if I click run here, let's do that. If I click run, see now the program is running. We have our we have like the tools that we can actually use to debug when our program is running. We have the CPU usage, we have a whole lot of tools that we can actually see. So when you see this, we know that, oh, our program is running, our form is up, and we can now start interacting with our thing. So this time is called run, or it's called a runtime. So a dynamic array actually allows us to give it a size when the program is running, or at runtime. That's what it does. So we do not specify a size in declaration, but the moment we click a button, then the size is actually specified. Now, to give or to resize the array, or not to even to resize it. Yeah, let me just use the word resize for now. But to give an array a size at runtime, we can just use this keyword redeem. You guys are familiar with this, I know. And then my array, we give it a size. Notice that this is happening when the program is running, not before. It's very, very important to know about this. Now, from here, we can do the usual. Like the things that we used to do with the static, we can do this, you know, yeah, I think, yeah, we can, it will now allow us to do this. There is a common error that a lot of people are running into. For example, if you try to do this before resizing your array, you must see this other famous error. Let's see if it's gonna pop up here. Let's see, button. It's an exception. Where is it? Why isn't it? Anyway, is this error that keep on saying something like null exception and whatnot? The reason why you keep on getting that error is because you're trying to use an array before giving it a size. I don't know if that makes sense. In other words, let's see if I can I guess we'll just come across that error as we go, because right now I can't think of a way of triggering it. So far we have resized our array, our dynamic array. So now what we can do now is to interact with it as if it was a static array. So like the things that we used to do with a static array, we can do with a dynamic array. Okay. So yeah, we can specify our index once again. We can say go to index number 1 and put, and so again, if we do this, it will still work. It's just that at UJ they recommend that we start at 1. The reason for that is because of to avoid the confusion with counting. Okay, so we can do this. But this for manual testing, and it should still work. Let's see if it does. Yeah, let's try to display an element at index 1. It should work. Okay, there is 78. We can also, do the looping part for int, and then all of that. But okay. I can't think of a proper example right now, but it's fine. Let's introduce something different, the 2D arrays. As you might have guessed, a 2D array is basically an array that has 2 dimensions. Before I can actually continue, let's
Yes, sir.
Yeah, questions.
Can I ask, like, when maybe I want to edit something in my array, say I want to edit in position number 4, like how do I access that position?
Oh yeah, sure. Let's see. Should we use? Okay, let's do both. Let's start with a static array, and then we'll continue with the dynamic array. So to edit your thing, what you'll do is to basically let's go back a little bit. Let's say this is what we had, and then let's use that old syntax that I've shown you before, the one of storing things manually. Uh, Actually, this is a bad example because it's gonna force us to start at index 0. So let's do this instead. So index number 1, we store 9. So yeah, our array has a size of 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then this is 9. And then let's try to have something like that. Okay, so this is our array, basically. It has 1, 2, 3, 4. So at index number 1, it has a 9. At index 2, it has a 12. At position number 5, it has a 91, and so on and so on. Now, let's say you wanted to like edit index 3, or you wanted to update a value at this position or at this index. You can basically come here and say, you can, okay, let me comment this out and say edit. You can just come here and say my array at index number 3. Okay, so what this will do is that it's going to override, or it's going to remove the old value and put the new value at this position. So instead of us seeing 51, we won't see that anymore. We'll see 100. So let's see if this will work. Message box, and then what is this thing doing? And then position number 3. Yeah, so this thing is called, okay, wait, as you can see. So this is called overriding. So overriding is a situation whereby, well, let me just write it here because this may be like important for your semester test 1. So overriding is a kind of a situation whereby you have declared a variable. So you're gonna write it here. So you declared a variable here. So let's say integer, and gave it a value. But sometime later, you decide to do this. Later on, you do this. So this is called overriding. It's a situation whereby you're trying to remove, or not to remove actually, yeah, to remove actually, or to replace. Yeah, this is a proper word. To replace an old value with the old one. So x ultimately will end up being 4 instead of 9 or 7. The latest value is the one that gets to be stored last, or is the one that gets to be the updated value. So this is how you actually go about editing your thing. You access that, you access your index and then update the value. It might be more interesting when we like ask the user to actually specify the kind of index that they want to update, and then they give us a value and we do that. Maybe let's try to do that, or let's see. So let's declare a local variable and call it something like new value, or not even that. Because we are using indices, so we can say new index, and then we can use something called an input box. Oh, you guys already know about this. So enter an index to update. You can also do this, cannot we? Never mind, you learn about this later. Okay, so this has to be an integer. Did we? Why is this thing not shouting here? Because we didn't specify the type. So why isn't it highlighting errors? Okay, I don't know why it's doing that. But let's do this. It's integer. So remember, whatever value that comes from an input box, by default, it's a string. So here, it's shouting because we're trying to, so whatever value we get here, it's a string, right? And this is an integer. And we cannot store, we cannot put a string value into an integer value. There is a conflict. So now we need to convert. So you guys are familiar with this as well. So this is called casting. We're converting from another type to another type. But wait a minute, you might ask yourself, since this thing is a string here, or whatever thing that you get from an input box is a string, and we're trying to convert a string to an integer, does it mean that if, let's say I had, does it mean that we can, so let's say this was dim value as integer. Does it mean that we can do this and come here and say convert to integer? We can't. We cannot do this, unfortunately. So this only works for, hey, what is this thing doing now? Convert to integer. So we'll actually run into issues later on. It doesn't actually work. The reason for that is because this only works for like numbers that are represented as strings. For an example, in this case, let's say the user gives us a 1, then the representation of that will be something like this. Then when it converts, it simply removes these quotes here and brings us a raw number, which is just a 1. But in this case, if we try to remove these quotes, we'll simply have informatics, and then when we try to use this, we'll run into exceptions. So it's very, very important to know about these differences. Where were we? Oh yeah, so we're trying to ask the user to give us the index, and then what's this? We will then ask them to give us the value, the new value that they want to put or to update with. So yeah, so new value as integer. So let's ask the user to give us the value that they want to update. The thing with the, okay. Um, Again, we need to do this. We need to convert that to an integer, otherwise we are risking the thing. Now, we don't know this, because at this point in time, when we get to this line, the user has already given us the index as well as the value. So we can just go to our array and say my array at index new index, and then we can just put a new value there. And then let's see, how can we test if this works? Okay, we can actually print out what's stored at this, because we already know what's in our array, so we will know that this value was not there when we actually see the results. So go to new index and display what's stored there. Let's run and see if this works. Oh, I forgot the parentheses. Let's see. Enter an index to update. let's try index 1. A value has to be 250. And then it says this. So as you can see, it has worked. So this is how you can actually go about updating your thing. The value stored in an array. I hope that has answered your question. Who was that Glamazi? Okay.
Yeah, so thank you.
Okay, no, welcome. Now let's see if we can continue. So the logic is the same even for dynamic arrays. You will do the same thing here that we've done. Yeah, now let's introduce the 2D arrays. A 2D array is slightly different. Well, it's slightly different only because of the dimensions. So what we'll usually do is let's actually declare a static 2D array. So let us do that. Where's my okay, yeah. So we give it a size. So let me just give you a context or a basic idea behind a 2D array. So a 2D array is something like a table, something like this. So the reason why it's called a 2D array is because it has this dimension and this dimension. That's the reason why it's called a 2D array. So we need to realize that to access an element in this array, we need to specify, okay, I didn't label this, but it's fine. Let's say this was for time 1, time 2. Let's actually use the columns and rows because that's more relatable. So column 1, column 2, column 3, and so on until the last column. And then these are row 1, row 2, row 3, then column 1, column 2, column 3, and so on. Now, when you want to access an element, let's say this element, you'll then specify a column as well as a row rather, and a column. Where these two meet, it's where you have remember your multiplication timetable, your multiplication table. This is how it actually works. We trace an element using a row and a column. Yeah, so a 2D array is basically a table. But how does this work actually in code? Let's see. So let's declare a static 2D array. So we need to specify the row. Let's for this example, let's say this represents the number of rows and this represents the number of columns. So this is in essence a table that has 3 rows and 2 columns. Now, how can we use this though? Now the problem now is that we now need to introduce the concept of a 2D or of a UJ grid. Because to display this 2D array more effectively, we need to see that on a UJ grid. So let's actually bring up a UJ grid here. And I think it was one of the questions in the chat. Okay, so let's give this grid a name, a meaningful name. So I'm gonna give it something like GRD chat. So yeah, the reason why we're giving it a name is because we wanna ensure that when we code, we can actually have access to it. We can be able to refer to it. So it's more useful when we give it a customized name. Now, so let's see how we can actually go about storing the data in our 2D array. So let's think about it. Let me open my notepad. So it has 3 rows and 3 columns, right? And 2 columns. So which means it's something like, actually let's make it have 4 columns. So in representation, this is something. This is the thing that we have. It has 3 rows and 4 columns. So let us update these here. 3 rows and 4 columns. Okay, now so what can we do next? Oh, we're trying to like see how we can store the data in our thing. Notice something here. If this is my if this is my array or my table, to access this element 9, I can just say this row, which is 2, and then which column is this? 2. So if I specify 2 and 2 in my in this representation, then it's supposed to return a 9. So this is how it basically works. But wait, oh yeah. If we move from there to this, so 2 and 3, 2 and 3, it's 1. And then if we specify 1 and yeah, so row 1 and column 2, it's supposed to be this value here. This is how it actually works, right? So just to give you an idea. So now let's try to see how we can actually store the data into this 2D array. So this is what we can do. So manually, we can go there and say, okay, go to index number, not index. Oh, the other thing that I forgot to tell you guys, for those who are doing computer science, you realize that this thing is called a cell into our 2D array. Yeah, we can refer to this as a cell or an entry. Hey, wait, can you guys see my notepad? I'm not sure if you guys can. Because I think where is that thing? Can you guys see my notepad? Can someone please confirm?
No, sir.
Oh, ish, damn. Uh, let me try to. Where is that thing now? Oh, ish, where is that thing of sharing my screen? Hey, I can't. I think it was this. I can't see it anymore. But it's fine. I won't be using Notepad anyways. Okay, so what I was trying to explain down there was that um let's say we had like a table, a 2D table, or just a table, because the table is a 2D anyway, like this. Notice that this table will have how many? Let's say 3, yeah, 3 rows and 4 columns. Yeah, this is what you basically have. And I said that a more intuitive way of thinking of this is by using a multiplication table. For example, if I want to access this number here, I need to go to row 2 and this column, which is column 3. And then, so that's the basic idea behind a 2D array that I'm trying to show here. Now, if I wanted to what's this? Let us assume that this array or this table is empty. So it's an empty space, empty space, empty space everywhere. If I wanted to store a value here, all I'll do is to basically specify row 1 and column 1, for example. And then I put a value there. If I wanted to come here, this is row 1, but column 2. So this is what I will end up with. So let's see, how many? 3 times 4 is 12. So I must have 12. Okay, so let's see, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So yeah, so I hope you guys get the idea behind the 2D array. So I'm gonna come here and say, wait, what's this? So notice that we have 3 rows, so I'm gonna say 1, 2, 3, and then this will change from 1, 2, 3, and 4. So these 4 lines here, what are they doing? Notice that the row didn't, okay, maybe I should finish first. Now the row changes to 2, and then 2, 2. How many rows do we have? I think it's 3 rows. Oh yeah, sure. 1, 2, oh wait, 3, 4. And then now we go to row number 3. Oh yeah. Yeah, we just come here to this row, oh, to this row here, the last one. And then we specify the column 1, column 2, column 3, column, just like that. So where is it? It's here. So it's row 3 now. So 3, row 3, row 3, and. But now what needs to change is the column per row. No, no, no. For this row, the columns are the ones that will be changing. So column 1, column 2, column 3, and column 4. Let's separate this a little bit. So let's do that. And yeah. So notice something here. This deals with a single row. Hence, the row here just remain the same. This here deals with a single row, which is row 2. Hence, it remained as a 2. Same here. So this entire thing or these entire lines here deal with the same row. The only thing that are changing was the column. So we are basically we stand here and then we go across until this row finishes. Then we will go to the next. This row will finish here. We go to the next row, which is row 2. When this row finishes here, we go to the next row, which is row 3. That is the basic idea behind storing elements inside of our 2D array. Of course, we can have different values here. Let me know if you guys have any questions at this point in time. 32,
I see.
29. Yeah.
So when our array it is like this, it is not linked to our trade. So we should, after this, we will link it to our trade so that it can be able to track this, like if in column what towards, in row what towards.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Thank you for reminding me of that. Yeah, it's actually a good question. So remember, an array, whether it's a 2D array or a 1D array, it's for storing the data. But a grid or AUJ grid is for displaying that data. So what we'll basically do, what happens between a AUJ grid and an array is that we pull the data from the array and display them on the grid. So that's how these two are related, but they are not necessarily linked in that sense. We just take the data from our array and then put it or just display it on our grid. And again, a grid it's only for displaying. You cannot really pull the data from your grid. I hope this makes sense. But yeah, I will be demonstrating this issue of displaying them on the grid. So like displaying these values here. And I think we should do that just now. Yeah, but in short, a grid is for displaying these values, and this array is for storing them. A grid and an array have two different tasks in this context. Let's see. Wait, but I hope that has answered your question. Who was that? I think it was Glamazi. Was it Glamazi? I think.
Yes.
Okay, you're welcome. And okay. Let's go through this concept of, let's actually go through a grid. Let's initialize a grid. Let's give it the rows. Let's label it. Let's do all of that. Okay, so let's actually define a subroutine. So for those of you who wanted to know about subroutines, so this is one of them. I think we have one here. Okay, but I want to declare the one for initializing the dimensions of the grid. So let's call it something like that. And this is a subroutine. So you will notice that these lines are turned in green. So you guys by now you know that these are just comments. So the compiler ignores everything that comes out of this sign, or everything that is a comment is ignored. Like it is not even part of the compilation or of the runtime environment. So let's okay. Let's initialize our grid. So this is how we can visualize our grid. We need our grid to have 3 rows, and we need it to have 4 columns. And we need an extra column to label. We need an extra row to label. So to label it something like row 1, row 2, row 3, column 1, column 2, just like that. So which means if originally the number of rows we have here are 3, we then need to say plus 1 to cater for the top column, or for the to cater for the labeling row and column as well. So we'll simply say plus 1. I hope that makes sense. And it's not something new to you guys. So let's try to do that. So we'll say grd, which is our uj grid dot rows. Notice that the number of rows we have here is 3 and 4. As a matter of fact, let's try to make this more meaningful. Can we do this? Let's see. Can we say private number of rows and then number of columns as integer? And then, let's actually put this before this line here. Ish, what is this thing doing now? Ish, okay. It did. Okay, let's declare the number of column and the number of rows like that. The reason why we're doing this is because we want to like avoid a situation whereby we forget what the number of rows were. Because remember, this represents the number of rows and this represents the number of columns of this 2D array. So we notice that we have a 3 here, and then 4 rows, and then we have 3 rows. We have 4 columns here, and then here we also have 4 columns. So this is how it actually works. Can we do this? Let's see, number of rows here, and then number of columns. I hope it works because we haven't yet initialized the number of rows and the number of columns. So this might not work, but let's hope it works. If it doesn't work, then we'll need to come back and try to do something. So the rows, which are these ones here, they'll need to be number of rows plus 1. So remember, we need an extra row at the top for labeling. So that top row will be containing text like column 1, column 2, column 3, and column 4. That's the top row. Now, for the columns as well, we need the same thing. We need an extra column here at the beginning for labeling row 1, row 2, row 3, and so on. So I hope that makes sense. So this is what we'll do. Number of columns plus 1. At this point in time, our grid has dimensions. So what we can do is that what else can we do? We can actually label our grid. So it's actually a good practice for you guys to like comment. So whatever you do, if it's something major, you comment. So I can say something like resizing the grid dimensions. Now, what I want to do next is that I want to label. I want to come to the first column and write row 1, row 2, row 3. Top column, column 1, column 2, I mean top row rather. And then I write something there so that our data can be more meaningful. Let's now notice something here. For you guys are now familiar with loops, I know. And then notice something here though. We get it's not really convenient for us to just, okay, before I can explain this, let's define this subroutine here. So let's say grd. So you guys know about this as well, the one for putting what's this, for putting a text or a value in a grid, right? So grd chart dot, so it's whatever row we receive here. So I'm gonna specify that in a minute. Chart, and then the column. We specify the column, and then we specify the, hey, what's going on? Okay. And then the value, which is 2. Now let's define our parameters. You guys are not familiar with the syntax of saying by val and by ref. By the way, even if you don't specify them, it should still work. The reason why they're saying you guys must specify them is because they want you guys to know the difference between by val and by ref and how useful they are. And I'm going, for sure, you guys know about as integer and then t as string.
Yes, sir. Can you please also do touch up on the difference between byval and byref?
Okay, yeah, I'm going to do that in a second. Oh, what am I doing here? Oh yeah, so we have the by val and by ref. So remember, when you write computer programs and when you write your code, right? What happens is that behind the scenes, the data that we put into this program is not stored into like into Visual Studio or Visual Basic. It's stored into the memory of your computer. Think of it this way. Let's say this is the memory, right? Yeah, let's say this is the memory. Yeah, let's say this is the data stored in the memory. So what will now happen is that when you say by var, Visual Basic or your operating system, which is Windows, will go to this memory inside of your computer and copy this value and then bring it to your Visual Studio or bring it to where you have actually called your thing. So let's say, okay, I can't think of an example. Right? So, but that is the basic idea behind by var. It goes to the memory and copies the value that your program has stored and then brings it back as a copy to this program of yours. And then you'll be interacting with the copy as opposed to the original value. There was this by ref is the opposite of that. So what happens with by ref is that when you specify something to be ref, so ref basically stands for a reference. What is a reference actually? Well, a reference is just a memory address. So remember I told you about the memory. So when you store a value inside of the memory, your computer or your operating system refers to that using a memory address. So it's stored at a certain address in memory. So that's how computers actually know where values are. They use addresses to those memory to those locations or to those memories. So by ref simply stands for, so this ref here is a shortcut for reference. So this basically says access a value by reference. Instead of you giving me a copy of this, I want to go there directly and modify it while it's in the memory. I do not want you to give me the copy. I want to go there myself and modify that value in the memory. That's how. So usually, Byref is useful when we deal with arrays. Why arrays? Because arrays can be huge. So it's not really convenient for us to be like copying the entire array back into. So that's going to like cause a lot of what's this memory wastage. Imagine if we had like an array that stores million elements, because that is possible. And then that's going to take time, right? Imagine having to copy each and every element of that array. That's gonna like take time, and the resources of your computer might actually be under trouble. But I hope does it make sense though, the difference between the by ref and by var.
Yes.
Okay, so let's see how far are we? How far are we? How far are we? Oh yeah, so let's see if I can still do these. Where is that thing? Um oh, okay, yeah, let's just continue. Okay, so this is what we've done here. So what is the difference between a subroutine and a
So,
yes?
can we please go to the 2D array part, the where we did our 2D array?
We're here.
Yeah, this part. So remember that when we use the one-dimensional array, we could just do one line and like store the values in just one line of code, right?
Yes.
So isn't there like a smarter way of like storing this stuff except for the dynamic array, like still a static, isn't?
Oh yeah, there is. We can actually use a loop to do this. Which is what I was trying to like show you here. We'll actually get there actually. Because here I was just trying to demonstrate or as to how these values are actually stored in the thing. Because if I started by going with the shortcuts, you guys were not really going to understand, or some of you maybe were not going to understand how this issue of interchanging rows and columns actually work, because a loop is not going to show you directly that, oh, so first of all, a column might actually, not a column actually, we need to hold a single row while a column keeps on changing, just like that. But yeah, we're gonna transition from this into a loop in a minute. There is a smarter way of doing it. Actually, there are smarter ways of doing this, because this is not efficient, and you won't be writing code this way actually. So let's, where's that thing? Oh yeah, we were somewhere here. Yeah. So now that you guys know the difference between by val and by ref, we can just do this. Because I know that you guys, okay, is this supposed to be by val or by ref? I don't know. I forgot the string part. But in any case, you guys know. So you're good to go. Now let's do this, guys. Let's label our columns, this column, the first column, and give it values like row 1, row 2, row 3, and so on and so on. So you can just come here and say label the grid. Now, obviously, we will use a loop that will run from this to this, because although we know the size of this 2D array beforehand, meaning we can just go ahead and say place in grid, and then we are like, okay, so let's start with these ones here. We are like, go to row 0, and then column. Which column is this one? It's still 0. Okay. And then you're like, okay, next time I want the row to change to 1, and the next time it changes to, but this is not efficient. Just like this one, it is not efficient. So we might want to use a loop, because we realize that, okay, there is some sequential pattern here. It moves from 0 to 1 to 2. So let us actually use a loop, because that's more faster than doing this. So okay, so this is, let's use something like C, or C as integer is equal to 1 to number of, is it supposed to be from 0 or from, okay, because this one is 0. Is it 0? I can't remember, but we will see as we go. So place in grid, and then we specify what will be changing here. It's the rows, okay? And this cannot be columns either. It needs to be number of rows. So here we need to say that, yeah. Notice that I've used R. So I want this thing to correspond to the number of rows, so that when I experience errors, and so it's those kind of situations whereby I want to debug, or I've came across an error. When I go down like this, I can clearly see that, oh, so this loop runs through the rows. But if I use something like X here, I wouldn't really recall fast what this loop goes to and from where. So this is for your own good. Now, the column doesn't change if we want to label like this, these dimensions here, or these, what are they called? This first column. So the columns remain the same. And remember, this second part here tells us about the columns. As you can see, C for column, and then the first one speaks about the rows. And then here we have the actual value, which is a string. So we can just go there and say, let's write something like, not the columns, but row something. So we can do that. and then R, row R. So because our loop will be running from 1 all the way to number of rows, it will run from 1, 2, 3, 4 all the way to number of, so R will be changing because this loop keeps on incrementing. Now, this process or this concept of combining a string with a value using this sign is called concatenation. So you guys, maybe it might be important for your semester test. I don't know, concatenation. Okay. So let's actually see if this will work because of this issue of starting at index number 1 as opposed to 0. Let's see, will it work? It crashes. What does it say? Index, yeah, here's another famous exception that you guys come across. I'm sure you guys are not familiar with this, with this error. It's actually an exception. The reason why this error is happening is because we're trying to use an array that is either doesn't have the space, or we didn't give it the space, or we didn't resize it, or we're using an array that what's the other reason again? I forgot, but I'll recall in a minute. Notice something here. Did we initialize the number of rows and the number of columns? We didn't. Can you see what the danger is? So that's the reason why it's shouting. So we need to come here and do it. So number of rows is equal to, let's give it something like 3, and then number of columns to be 4. And I don't think it's supposed to shout at us. Okay, it might still give us an error because let's see, because we've done this before giving them sizes, but let's see if Visual Basic allows us to do that, because other programming languages don't. Let's see. Button 1, yeah, it still does. So which means we cannot pass these variables here before initializing them. That's the reason why we're getting this error. So let's try something different. What can we do? What can we do? Okay, for simplicity, let's bring wait, what's going on? Oh yeah, it showed. Let's do this instead. Is that a question? Okay. Yeah, now it doesn't crash anymore. So yeah, now it has worked. Okay, so now what's missing? What's missing? Oh, we need to call our subroutine. This one in here. Let's see, we can do it somewhere. Let's see, where can we put this? Let's put it here. Initialize. So if you do not call a subroutine or your function, then this functionality or this implementation will not actually what's this? Will not take effect, or it will not work in that sense. But will this work? I don't. Okay, so yeah, there we go. But this is too small. Now let's also try to go and label the columns and say this is column 1, column 2, column, and so on and so on. So I had some doubts, so I was trying to remember if here we need to start at 0, or so we do not need to do that because Because basically when counting, we're gonna say we have row 0, row, so it wasn't gonna make sense. Let's go on and label our columns so we can have something like this. Okay, so I'm gonna say for CS integer. So for those of you who are doing computer science, wait, so I know that if I say this, it will still work. Instead of me saying for CS integer number of columns, it will still work because you see here what I've done. For those of you who are doing computer science, or for those who will be doing computer science, you will know why this is a hobby. You will know. Now let's label our columns. So we're gonna come here at the top and say column 1, column 2. Notice that the row doesn't change. It's only the columns that are changing. So and what column is that? What row is that? Is the first one at the top. So what's changing is the column. So because it's changing, we'll be using C, because C will change from 1 all the way to number of columns. And then we need to convert these, because remember the third parameter of our PIG, or place in grid routine, expects a string. So we need to ensure that, oh, actually, never mind. Yeah, we need to ensure that whatever thing we put here is fully a string. Otherwise, we may run into issues. And then we'll say, okay, so column. So now we need to concatenate. So this is concatenation. Now, let's see. I think this will work actually. It will work. Now let's try to display the values of our array on the UJ grid. So this is what we were talking about. Column 1, column 2. So these are the labelings. 1, 2, 3. So this is how it actually goes. If you have the number of rows, let's say here we have 3 rows like this. You then need to say +1. The +1 is for this one here. For this labeling. For the columns again, we have how many columns? 1, 2, 3, 4. So if the user gives us 4 columns, we need to say +1 for this labeling. And if there was something else like total column, we then say +2 to cater for the labeling as well as the total, just like that, and so on and so on. So yeah, let's see if we can.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Why your VPL doesn't show user interface when you start?
Well, it doesn't.
No.
Hey, what's going on with this?
It only
Hey,
show the code.
yeah, damn. Okay, I thought it does. Okay, let's see if I can reshare. I think is this issue of it failing to like share my screen, because it only shares Visual Studio. I can't find that anymore. Okay, let's wait a minute. Give me a second. Um, okay, let's do this and we share, and then screen share. Okay, I think now you should be able to see my form. Can you see it?
Yes, no, it is good.
There we go. Okay, okay, now let's try to, okay, so for those of you who didn't see the form properly, this is what we have done. We have labeled our so our rows such that this becomes row 1, row 2, row 3, and then also the same for the columns as well. So we're trying to make this more meaningful, you know. So this is what we have done thus far. So now we want to store the data, or yeah, the data of the array, not to store, sorry, to display that data into this grid. So a grid is only for displaying. You cannot pull the data from away from the grid. It's only for displaying. So the other thing that I was explaining before was that if your user gives you three rows, like in this example, you have how many rows? Originally we had 1, 2, 3 rows. Then we need to say +1 to cater for this row, which was for labeling. Same applies for the columns. If they give us 4, if the user gives us 4 columns, we then need to say +1 to cater for this one, which is for labeling. If there is something like average or total as a column at the end or even at the bottom, we'll then say +1 or +2 to cater for that total column and this labeling. If it's average total, you'll then say +3 because it's going to be 1 for the labeling and then 2 for total and then 3 for the average column. You guys already has this idea. We're just doing a revision here. I know that you guys understand these ones very well. So now let's go about displaying all of these onto our grid. And for modularity purposes, let us actually do that on a separate button. So let's do that. So I'm not gonna rename the button. Oh, let's do that actually, because I don't know how long this will take. So let's rename this to BTN display. So this button is for displaying the input or the data that is inside of our array directly on the grid. So we can just do that. Double click the button, now it brings us here. Now, how can we do this though? Because this thing is a 2D array, we need then to have 2 loops. The other loop that will be going through the rows and the other loop that will be going through the columns. Unlike a 1D array where we only had like one array that goes from 0 or from 1 to the length of the array. Right. So let's see, how can we do this though? Let's look at this just to get a basic idea of what's happening. Notice something. We said that the first dimension here represents the rows, and then this one here represents the columns. But notice that the number of rows remain the same, and then it changes. So as it remains the same, the columns are changing, and then it changes after. So immediately after the number of columns finishes, then the columns will now change from 1 to 2. It will stay the same. As soon as the columns finish, the column will change to 3, just like that. So we can use that idea here and say, okay, why don't we then nest our loop? Because nested loops in any language say that if we have, let's say, let's say this is the outer loop, and then another loop that is nested on the inside is called the inner. Okay, so and let's say the outer loop simply displays. So this is just a pseudocode. It's not what's this? Okay, let's say it displays something like a hash sign, and then the inner loop, what it does is that it displays the what is it called, an asterisk, for an example. Yeah. So these are two loops and they are nested. And then yeah, so this loop is inside of this loop here. So what will basically happen is that the output is going to be something like this. So let's separate that with an asterisk. Now here's how the output will be. Because the outer loop, or yeah, the outer loop will remain the same. So it's gonna print an asterisk. Then it will give a chance for this loop to run entirely. So if this inner loop was running, let's say from 1 to let's say 5, and the outer one was running from 1 to let's say 3, for example, what will happen then is that the outer loop will print a hash and then give a chance to this loop to run fully. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because the inner loop runs 5 times. Then when the inner loop is done, the outer loop will increment from 1 then to another to 2, for example, and then it will display an asterisk again. The inner loop will run 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It will complete. Then when the inner loop is done, the outer will increment to 3, and then it will display an asterisk. The inner loop will run and finish. It will display asterisk 5 times because it's supposed to run 5 times from 1 to 5. So the basic idea here is that the loop that is on the inside will need to run until it finishes while the outer loop stays as it is. That's the basic idea behind nested loops, which is what you are seeing here. The row stayed the same, and then this ran and finished. The row stayed the same, ran, finished, just like that. So let's see if we can implement this in Visual Basic. So obviously, just for our design, we would like to have the outer loop to be like the rows. So we wanna make sure that the row will stay the same and then the columns will change. The row stays the same. So the outer loop in this case will then need to be for the rows. It doesn't mean that always it's like that, but for this specific example, that's how we will actually do it. Even if you were to do like to select the columns, it will work perfectly fine. It's just that in this case we chose the rows. So let's see. 1 to number of rows. So this is the outer loop. And then for C as the integer, want 1 to number of columns. So, and then next. Okay, so you'll notice that sometimes we include this next C, sometimes we don't. Actually, this is supposed to be here. Next R, sometimes we don't. So in the earlier versions of Visual Basic, what was happening was that wait, why is it giving? Oh, there's an extra. So in the earlier versions of Visual Basic, what was happening was that if you didn't include this next C here, or this C, or this R here, your loop was not going to increment from 1 to this, from 1 all the way to number of rows or to the number of columns. But these days, even if we can just do that, it's gonna work. It won't even give us an error. So okay. Let's see. What are we doing? We're trying to display the values inside of this array, or the values of this array, directly onto the what's this? Onto the grid. Now let's see we can do that. Remember, to put stuff in the grid, we have a subroutine called PIG, which stands for place in grid. I think we've defined it somewhere. Yeah, over there. Now we just need to go and say row, column, and then what? We can call our array, so my array, and then obviously row and column. Basically, what does this thing do here that I've just, okay, wait, let's cast these. So remember, we are calling an array and then we're giving it a row and a column. This is this. It's like giving it a row and a column like this. It will return a single value, which is 9. So notice that the row and the column will be changing every time. So it ensures that we don't stay the same at the same cell or at the same value in that array. So it will change. So they'll keep on changing to give us like different values. Because we all know that R will run from 1 to the number of rows, and then C will be running from 1 to the number of columns. So that's how they will be changing. Okay, so I'm not sure if this will work. Let's test these and see if it does. What was this button doing? Oh, for initializing. Then when you display it, there we go. It does work. Okay, now okay, before I can continue, is there any questions? Okay. Now let's do something more meaningful. Let's say we wanted to like display the total. Let's say we wanted to sum up all of these numbers and then display the total at the end, and then do the same here and same here, total here. And let's say this is actually what is the total and the average. So we find the total here and then we display it in a separate column. We find the average, separate column, just like that. First of all, notice that we'll need 2 extra columns and another one here for the labeling. So we'll then come here and say 3, not for the rows, but for the columns. Like that. That's the first thing we'll actually do to make sure that we grow or we extend the number of columns on our grid. Now, let's implement another button. Should we use a button or a subroutine? Let's see. I think it's that time where we use the function. Because someone asked about the function here. Let's see, can we use a function here? Let's see. Let's try to do that. Maybe it will be useful. So to define a function, what is a function to begin with? Well, a function is basically a procedure that executes something and returns a value. It is the opposite of a subroutine. A subroutine basically does something and doesn't return a value. For an example, if you look at this subroutine, what is that subroutine? The place in grid one, or even this one, but I need the simpler one. Oh, this one. What does this subroutine return? Absolutely nothing. What it does is that it goes to the grid and does something, and then it ends there. It doesn't give us anything that we can see. So a function is the opposite of that. It will bring back something to us, and we can do something with the return value of that function. To define a function, by the way, this is not a, where is it? Oh, never mind. So to define a function, we simply use the keyword function. Does this thing come before or after the return type? Let's see. And then I can call it sum or total. Oh, it comes before. So, oh, not here, but here. As integer, and this needs to be a function. I hope it works. Oh yeah, there we go. Now, what do we want this function to do though? We need this function to actually go through these and give us the total. Let's see. So is this, but this is not necessarily, it is not necessarily an array in that sense. There is not necessarily a 1D array. So we cannot really come here and pass an array and then we let's think about it. What can we give to this? Or how can we go about finding the total here without necessarily having to worry about making this thing a 1D array? And then, because now we are being forced to pass a 2D array here. And then find, I guess that's the only way, because I can't think of any other way. Let's see, is there any better way of doing this than this one? Because I don't think there is. So the only option we have right now, or that I can think of, is to take this entire array, 2D array, pass it to our function, and then it will go through everything and just find the total. But the question is, what is it going to return? Like, what is the total that is going to return? Is it going to be for the entire 2D array or for a single thing?
I say, why don't you use for loop?
Yes, I want to use it here. So that's what I'm trying to use. But I'm still trying to think of a better way of finding the total. Because remember, if I take this entire 2D array and then I give it to this function, I will be trying to make it to find the total. But the question is, am I supposed to find the total for a single row and then return, or for the entire thing? That's the question I'm trying to ask myself. Or the return type or the return value, is it going to be the total for the entire 2D array or for single? Because remember, we're trying to display total here. When I have a total here and then a total here for this row as well, total for this row as well.
Or say
Right.
maybe create separate button, then use that for loop that is 2 for loops in one, yabo, then
Okay. Yeah, I think that could work. And then I use a function for something else because I wanted to demonstrate how a function works, and I kind of cannot come across. But anyway, I will find something else to demonstrate a function. Oh, okay, so this is, oh, I forgot to rename the button, but in any case, how far are we? 2 hours away. Okay, I think we should wrap up. Let's see. let's just rename this though to something like BTN total, and then um display total, and then let's just update this. Okay, so let's see. Let's see. I think the better way of doing this is to actually have a 1D array that will store. So this array is going to be in this way. That will store these values here. So at the index number 1 of that 1D array that we're creating, we'll store the sum of row 1. At index number 2, we'll store the sum of this row 2. At index number 3, we'll store the sum of the third row. And I have another array again for averages. And then at index number 1, we store the average of this row. Index number 2, we store the average of just like that. So I hope you guys get the idea. So let's see if we can do that. So obviously, we will want to declare like the the global variables for that, or for the global arrays for that. So let's say row total, which is just a thing, and then just for simplicity, we're going to make them static. So row average as double, and this is an array. So let's see. How many rows did we say we had? I think it was 3. So it means that our things must have like a size of 3 each, our arrays. Let's think about it. How are we going to solve this? Okay, so obviously we'll need to have our loops, because at the end of the day, we want to access each and every element. And to do that, we need a nested loop. Otherwise, we won't be able to go through each and every element. So let's start with the rows, obviously. For integer is equal to 1 to number of rows. Now, for integer, okay, wait a minute. So notice something. For every row, wanna find a separate total. So it means that before we can even start adding these things up or summing them up, we need to have a total variable that's initialized to 0. So when you go to this row, that variable must be empty, because otherwise we might run into issues. Let me show you what I mean. So let's declare a local variable here. There is no need for us to be saying here private, or no need for that. We can do that at the global level. So we use dim again when we want to declare variables locally. Remember what I said at the beginning? I said that if I declare something as dim, then any other button outside of this one won't be able to access it. And by the way, local variables are preferred over global variables when you go into things like working like what's this, production code, or in the professional space of coding. The reason for that is because or the reason why global variables are not preferred is because if this program here modifies number of rows mistakenly or accidentally, then notice that the rest of the buttons will be working with a wrong value or a value that was accidentally changed. So that's the reason why global variables are not preferred. So yeah, in case you've been asking yourself, well, if you haven't, then now you know. So let us do it. So we're saying that we need to declare a total variable and then initialize it to 0, so that by the time when we go through each row, or by the time when we find the total for the next or for the following row, it finds or it clears the previous total and resets it back to 0. So let's see, for C as integer is equal to 1, 2, number of columns. Okay. So let's find the total for a single. So this is what it will basically do. You see here, it's waiting on row 1, then add all of these things together. When it's done, reset the total back to 0, then come to the second row, add up all of these, then set the total back to 0, the total variable that we've declared to 0, and then just like that. This is what it does. Where is that button? Okay, so total. Yeah, because remember, this is the inner loop, and we said that the inner loop will run and finish. So when it finishes, then it's gonna go back again to the top here, and then it will try to execute this again. Then it will set it back to 0, and then run this and finish it again. Go back, set this thing to 0, just like that. So total, I hope that makes sense. 12 plus is equal to, and then to find the total, we just call our array like that, and then R and C. Because remember, R stands for rows. So this will go to row. It will go to a specific row and a specific column and find where these two numbers intersect, and then give us that value at that cell. So now we've got total. But notice that we'll know what this does here. So this is basically us saying total plus. So the reason why I'm doing this instead of this is because we will run into an issue of overriding this concept that I've told you about here, whereby the previous value keeps on getting removed and all of that. So we want to make sure that we add on top of what we already had, instead of us just trying to remove the previous value and then put the next one. So because otherwise, if we do this, then at the end of the loop or at the end of this program, we'll actually realize that, okay, the only value that we have is the very last value. We do not have the total. So we need to ensure that we have total. So this ensures that the old value that we had, store it with, or rather, sum it up with the new value from the array, and then add them to this variable. This will ensure that we don't run into issues of overriding. So a shortcut of that is this one. You guys already know about this. So let's see. Now, when this loop, the inner loop is done, when we are done going through the columns, we are now here. It's when the inner loop terminates for the first time. What do we need to do then? We need to, so it's here. Yeah, it has terminated. We then need to go and place in grid, because We now have a full total of that row. Because what? The row that runs through the column, the loop, or a loop that runs through the columns is now done. It means we have a total. Because if you put it on the inside here, you'll be okay. I'm gonna get in that. Let's see. So the row will be changing obviously because remember we'll store at this row, then changing to row 2 and then to row 3. So this way we're putting our totals. But will the column change? No, it won't. So, but which column is that? So it's number of columns plus 1. Yeah. Yeah, it's number of columns plus 1. It's gonna take us to this one here of totals, because these are the totals, 0, 5, and 5. These are the totals that I was trying to demonstrate. So it's going to say number of columns and then plus 1. Okay, and then what do we wanna put there? We wanna put a total. But remember to cast. Okay, will this work? Let's see. So one of the best practices that you can ever do when writing code is to actually run it before introducing a lot of things. So after this small progress, I just run the program to see if I don't run into any issues, because it's very, very difficult for you to debug a code that is, too long. Okay, so we forgot to display total here and average, but that is not much of an issue. So as you can see, our total displays very well. So if we add up all of this, they should give us 101. If we add up all of these, it will give us 130, and so on and so on. Because yeah, so let's try to display the averages and then these two as well. Then from there, I will, yeah. But before I can continue, any questions thus far? What time is it? Okay, so this button is basically for displaying the averages. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to rename it. But what I will do is that I will rename the last two columns. So I can just say play. I do not need a loop, because I know where exactly to put my what's this? To put this label. So for the row has to be, so the row doesn't need to change, it's row 0. And then the column has to be number of columns plus 2, plus 1 first. And then I put a total. I do the same thing for the average as well. And then, so this has to be number of columns plus 2, because it comes immediately after this one. And this will remain the same because we are on the same row. Okay. Now to find the average, why are we even doing this? We don't need a button for this, because remember, what is an average? An average is basically total over something. But notice that this button already finds, or it already calculates the total. So it means that what will happen is that we copy this and put it here. But this is not a good programming practice. Like copying the same functionality is not. So you shouldn't find yourself doing this, because this thing already does this. We can just autocomplete from this. We can find average from the total that we already have here. So no need for this button here. Or we can just, what we can do is to basically, where is our total? It's over there. Oh, I forgot to use our arrays to store. Okay, we'll do that in a second. Okay, so let's see. Then placing grid row and then column, the number of columns. We can say +2, obviously. And then can we do these? Can we say total? So to find the average, we need to divide it by the number of columns, isn't it? Let's see. Yeah, because these are columns, exactly. So can we do these over number of columns? Let's see if this will work. Oh, okay. Let's see if this will work. Okay, now let's do both. Okay, it seems like it does. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. What is 30? What is 30 over 4? Okay, so it seems like it works. But wow, also notice that these values are gone. We cannot access total anymore because this was a local variable as well as average. You can't, where is the average? What if we wanted to like have access to it? What if we wanted to like ensure that we display it somewhere? Right? This is where these arrays come. What will actually happen is that, okay, let's do that once again. What will basically happen here is that we will have an array that stores this. So this is basically an array, 1D array that stores these values. At index 1, it stores this one. At index 2, it stores this value. Just like that. Another array. At index 1, it stores this value. Index 2, it stores that. But notice that this array here is double. It is not an integer. So we need to modify this. Oh, we did actually. Okay. Oh, yeah, let's try to store the total and the average inside of these arrays. Let's see if we can do that. Where is wait, how can we do this? Let's think about it. So immediately after, when this loop is done, or when we're done finding the total, we can just say row total, and then go to R, because remember, for row number 1, we store total. For row number 2, store total. Row number, so which means this total goes through the rows, or it's for rows actually. So hence we're using R for rows. And then yeah, oh, so this is the 1D array. And then we now need to take or to put our total there like this. Now we know where to find our total. So other buttons now know, or other subroutines and functions and whatever, they know where exactly can they find the total in this array, the total for each and every day. And the tricky thing is that, or the tricky part here is that we couldn't have declared a single total variable because the totals that we are finding are multiple for every row. So it wasn't going to be possible for us to just declare one variable like this for a total and say we are done. Same applies to average as well. So let's find the average, or let's store the average. So we can say row average, which is an array that we've declared up there. And then we just say total over number of columns. So that's now if we do this, then there is no point of doing this, because now notice that we have a redundant code. We can just try to refactor or to reduce this code. instead of declaring displaying a local variable like this, we can just bring an array. So we can come here and say at R, and then here we do display the average like this, and this should work as expected. Okay, any questions thus far? Okay, still working as expected. Okay, now let's do the last part, which is the functions. Let's see if I've covered everything here. Did I? Functions, we've done, or we are yet to do the functions. In the 2D arrays, we've done that. Subroutines, functions, and arrays. So we've kind of done subroutines, functions, and arrays. We've done them. How to set up the UJ grid and how to, we've done that. Okay, let's do functions. Although I don't see the use of a function in this case, I'm just gonna make up something. Okay. So let's say we wanted to define a function for yeah, let's introduce a new button. So let's say I want to define a button, and not a button, but a function. And this function, what it does is that we give it an array. And then what it will do then is to something like find the total of that array, and then give it back to us.
Sorry, sir.
Yes.
Can you please use the function to calculate the total and the average?
Oh yeah, okay, let's see, let's do that. Okay. Private function. Oh, not here. Oh yeah, sure. Private function, and then find total. But if that is the case, then it means that, what is our thing? Because then it means that, what will our thing return here? Okay, never mind. Do you like have an idea? Or wait, maybe we can. Do you like have an idea as to like what should our thing return? Our function? Because I think it can return an array. No, yeah, an array. Then we can replace this part, or is it? We can do this. Yeah, we'll do that. Now I just want to demonstrate this concept of a function. Then the last part we'll be doing is to like convert this and make sure that we actually use a function to find something like this, a total and an average. But I just wanna what's this? I just wanna explain this from a simpler point of view. Integer. Okay, so with this function, we're trying to give it an array. So the array that I'm trying to give it, it is not part of the what we've been doing. It's an array that we will just manually create somewhere in this button. So for example, let's say dim my array, and then which has a size of 4 as integer. Um, And then can we do this? Actually, it's fine. Let's do this. The other thing that you'll notice here is that although we've used the same names, here with like this name here, my array, and this one here, they still do not conflict. Why? Because we're trying to create a new variable from a local space. So what if, oh, never mind. Okay. So now I can say my array. So what am I trying to do here? I'm trying to like store the data, some data into this array so that I can be able to like use it, because obviously you cannot use an array without it having the data. So okay, so it should have 4 elements. And then index 1, index 2, index 3 or position 3, and then position number 4. Okay, let's see how far we are. Okay, so this is basically an array that we have. I wanted to use this syntax of doing this, but then I realized that okay, it's gonna force me to like loop, or it's gonna force me to like start from 0 when I loop through that array. So which is the reason why I chose to do this, because with this method, it can actually allow me to start from 1 or from anywhere I want. You can even start at 2 if you want, but I mean, what's the point of doing that? So this array here, not this array, this function will accept any array and then do something. How do we pass an array in Visual Basic? So I think it's something like array, if I'm not mistaken, as integer. It's an array of integers. Okay, so you'll notice that it gives me this green line here because it needs me to return something. So the moment we do this, it disappears. So we can just say return total. Now, we'll declare a local variable again, and then we'll try to, oh, the other thing that I forgot to show you guys, but I'm gonna show you next time, was to edit the data on the 2D array. But so in case we wanted to like edit this value here, we will do that sometime. Where is our thing? Okay, so what this will do, because remember, sometimes you wouldn't really know the length of the array that you are passing beforehand. In this case, of course, we do, because this was a static array. But I mean, okay, never mind. So for we can say like something like for but in this case, I don't have the rows or the columns, so I can use any variable that I want. So let's use I, number of. So what's the length of my? I don't know what the length is. Well, I do, but I'm gonna assume that I don't know what it is, what the length is, because remember, the point of a function is that it needs to be as generic as possible, meaning you need to give it something, and then it needs to figure out that thing on its own. We shouldn't be finding ourselves passing everything to it. We must not give it like the length of this array. We mustn't pass here and say array length and all of that. We need to ensure that when we take this function and put it into another person's code, it still works without changing it. Because if we give it the length here, no, not the length. Yeah, if we actually assume that the length here is 4, of this array is 4, and then we're like, okay, let's pass a 4. When someone tries to run with this on their own machine, then their length is different. We have issues there, array of bounds or something. along those lines. So it needs to do that. It needs to cater for every scenario of. So let's see. We can say array dot length, and I think you guys know this property. And I think we need to. Do we subtract a 1 here? Because in Java we do. Why do we subtract a 1? Because I forgot. I forgot about, but I think we do. If it crashes, we'll come back and fix it. Now, wait, what do you guys think? Do we subtract a 1 here? Okay. No response. Okay, now let's see. So we have a total. All we will basically do is to say total, the same thing we've been doing, total plus equal to, and then we say array at index. So what does this thing do actually? It goes to this array, looks at this position and finds a value, and then stores that into total. Next time when it comes, it picks the next value, and then
Sorry, sir. We haven't learned about array.length, even though I understand it since you just explained it, but you haven't learned about it.
Oh, you haven't? Okay, that's no problem about it, but you're gonna learn about it in the next semester. In that case, then it's reasonable for you to pass the length because you haven't learned about it. So let's do that by var length as not length actually, but something like size, because length will conflict with this property. Okay. Size. Okay, and then there is our total. Then we need to call this function. Why is it? You see where the problem is? Yeah. So if you see it highlighting it in this way, it means that we haven't really called our. We need to call our function. It's warning us that this function is never called. So you need to take note of such cues or signals. Okay. Let's go back to here. And then let's try to actually calculate the total using this function. So because this function returns something, wait. Because it returns something, we need to declare something that will store that returned thing. And it returns an integer, so we need to declare an integer variable. We can call it, okay, something like sum, even total, because it's a local variable. So Visual Basic is going to create a new variable, and it will treat this as different from other variables that already has a similar name or the same name. Oh, what am I doing? This is not Java. As integer. Okay, so oh yeah, so I forgot to explain about that length thing, where we said we take our array, for example, like this array dot. What is it doing? Visual Basic. Okay. Not here, but yeah. Array dot. So what this does is that Visual Basic will determine the size or the length of the array on its own without you having to tell it what the length is. So, but you guys will learn about this in your following classes. So still using size. Now we now need to call our function. So find total. We give it an array. Which array are we giving it? There is an array over here. So okay, it's shouting. What is it saying? Oh yeah. So we need to give it the length. So in this case, we know what our length is. It's 4. So we can do that. And then we can display the total in something like a message box. I mean, why would we display this on a UG grid? Because remember, this data has nothing to do with this data that we've been trying to like work with. But let's see if this will work. So this is button 2. Okay. So it says that the sum is 20. I hope it's right. You do the same thing for the average as well. So we'll use the same logic, but now here you'll divide by the number of those elements in an array. That's how we'll actually go about it. In other words, you'll come here and divide by 4, and then this will return double. I hope it makes sense. Oh, not here. Yeah, this will need to be double.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so now I'm trying to think of ways of how we can actually use a function here to find the total and an average. Let's think about it. While we're thinking about it, is there anyone who can come up with something better? Let's see. Okay, let's reverse this. Reverse this. Any idea, even if it's not really code, just an idea of how we can tackle this. Okay, let's go back to our here. Because okay, let's see, we're looking through, and then our function is going to return. What is it going to return here? Oh, so which means on this point we can find our total, and then it returns a single okay, it returns a single array. Then what do we do with that single array? Hey guys, what do you think? I'm running out of ideas here. Because if we do this, is it private function? So what we're trying to do here is basically we're trying to define a function that we will use to find the total of the data that we've been working with. Because now you guys understand how before you can even go here in a test, you guys are going to write like 2 papers. There's going to be paper A and paper B. Another paper is going to say, so it's for test 2 though, not for test 1. So another paper is going to say use a function like this to find the total. Then you'll be expected to like do this using a function and come and call it here like this. Now we realize that okay, this is possible when this function actually returns a value. If it's a subroutine, we cannot do this. But in a test, you might find a question that says, so remember paper A might say use a function to find total, but paper B might say use a subroutine to find total, to do the same thing, but using a subroutine. So that's where the issue of biref comes in. So you also need to be able to do that. And I don't think, is it long? I don't think so. Okay, let me quickly show you that right now, because I know some of you are going to come across this in test 2. So we're defining a subroutine that will still do the same thing. So find total or find sum, whatever the case may be. Now, remember earlier on when I explained this issue of by ref and by var, when I said that with the by ref, this program or Visual Basic is going to modify a value directly in memory. So the changes that are made when we use by ref are permanent, and they are made to the original value as opposed to a copy in memory. So we might want to pass some variable here. Okay, let's do this. So by var, okay, let's actually do this. Let's pass an array first. So an array, and then is an array. Why isn't it shouting as an integer now? We need to pass a total here by ref, so that when we why is it doing that? Yeah, so that when we come here, what we'll basically do is that we'll simply declare a variable called total as integer, and then give it 0 like this. So remember, when we do this value or this variable is going to like be stored somewhere in memory, right? Now, if we call a subroutine that was defined by ref, and we pass that total here, we are forcing this subroutine to go and modify this total directly in memory. So now it means that we can take these as an advantage. Let's see if it doesn't click yet. Wait a minute. Okay. So yeah, let's follow the same procedure. But now we do not have size, do we? Yeah, we need to pass size as well, because okay, so by all size as integer. Oh, I think it's getting late now. I didn't expect this thing to last for this long. What is this thing doing here? Okay. Yeah, so and then now it's now conflicting with it. Now we do not need this anymore. This thing doesn't need a subroutine doesn't return anything either. So this is where we are. What does this thing even do though? So remember, we have passed our total as by ref. So this total is a variable that will be declared somewhere. Someone will pass it from another button or from another sub program, right? And because we've passed this thing by ref here, what will happen is that Visual Basic is going to go to the memory and do this, or it will go in and do these calculations here and then store this total there in the memory. So by the time when this subroutine is done, in the memory, the total value will be containing a correct representation of total. in memory. So this is what you could actually do it. You could try to do it inside of your inside of your test. Let's see, in your test they might ask something like this. So we'll give it an array because it expects an array as the first argument. So our array here is called that. And then we need to give it the size as the second. I think we had 3. Oh, look at this, man. There's a mistake here. But why is this thing not shouting, bro? Why isn't it giving me errors, though? Okay, what? Oh, this is not the correct thing. This is not the correct. Yeah, so it needs an array, size, and total. Okay. An array, size, as well as the total variable. Then yeah, this was initially 0. And then this went to memory and changed this 0 to the total of this array. I hope this makes sense. Wait. Okay, so this should still work. Let's see if it does do. Yeah. Okay, I think now it's too late. I think we should wrap this up. But I'm going to note this thing of trying to use a function to find an average and a total. That's the first thing we'll do in our next session. Because now it's too late. It's around 10, and see that some of you are. What is this? Some of you are leaving. Okay, let's see. Is it possible to do a past paper on our next session? Yeah, for which test? For test 1 or for test 2? I don't think. Yeah, we can do that. We can. We can do test 1 on our next session. And one of our previous and DJ previous practicals. Yeah, you guys can actually send me your previous practical. Then next time we will do we want to go through that practical. And then I'm also going to note, I think it will also do that, but yeah, I'm also going to note the things that we need to do next time. So the first thing we'll do is to try to find out how we can actually use. If it's possible, yeah, we'll find out how to use a function, in this case, to determine the total as well as the average. That's what we'll do next time. And then do you guys have any comments, add-ons, or questions?
I said,
Yes.
where do we get past papers?
I don't know if you guys have any other group chats where you can ask, but for Informatics 1A, unfortunately, it's hard to download the past papers because the site that I know for downloading the papers, it's usually for exams and semester term. No, yeah, it's for tests. No, I think it's for exams. Let's check.
There's a link that I have. Like, I haven't tried it, but I'll send it to the group.
All right.
Yeah, you can bring that. And then another one is over here. Let's see if it will open fast. But in the meantime, any other questions or add-ons? Where is my... it's taking time. Okay, no problem.
I shall say, I want to say thank you.
No, you are welcome. It's my pleasure. You're welcome. Okay, so yeah, I think, is that a comment? Oh, yeah, I think let's meet next time. I hope you guys will have a great night. Good night, actually.
Thank you, sir.
Good night, sir.
You helped
Welcome.
us.